and saying, okay, where does the Bible come in this story of this city? And that helps us to understand the scriptures better, right? If we can understand what Jericho was like before the Israelites got there, then maybe we'll understand why the walls fell the way they did, as we're going to see here in just a little bit. Maybe we'll understand why the people of Jericho were so afraid. Maybe we'll understand the text a lot better. So the Bible is the last thing we go to in archaeology, and that's because it's not because the Bible is less important or anything like that. It's about trying to find the information first and then compare to learn more about both together. All right? So, Jack P. Lewis said this. Jack P. Lewis is a really good guy. Hard to listen to, but man, he writes good books. Any book he writes, you might want to get that, because he knows what he's talking about. He is among the top of our scholars within the church. And he's also gone now. He passed away last year, unfortunately. But anyway, he said that the aim of biblical archaeology is to illuminate the Bible rather than to prove the Bible. One will be blessed by the study of biblical archaeology if he studies with Bible in hand to test everything, hold fast to what is good. And that's the approach we need to take with archaeology. Number one, it can help us to understand the people of the Bible and what the Bible is talking about. And number two, then we can look at it and say, this is proof that the Bible is historically accurate. All right? So, one thing we don't do is treasure hunting like Indiana Jones here. All right? What we do is we go to these sites, and there is a huge organization of people. And archaeologists can be anything from people who actually dig into the dirt, which is usually volunteers and interns and that sort of thing. And then there are lab techs that they analyze the information, and there are people who record, and there's all kinds of people from different fields too. They're not all just archaeologists on a site. They need geologists sometimes you need biologists, which is weird, but it's true. You can do just about any kind of job on the field here, and off it as well. So, let's talk about some of the historical finds that we found. How am I doing on time, by the way?
Totally fine.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I just didn't want to go over or anything like that. So we got plenty of time for this. This is good. I'm going a lot faster than I thought I would. Usually I'm going overtime. That's good. So one of the finds that I wanted to talk to you is something called the Tel Dan Stela. And this is an artifact. Oh, before we do that, we need to talk about biblical minimalism. There is, among biblical archaeologists, there's kind of two schools of thought here. There's one group that is called traditionalists. And they're like me. And what a traditionalist is someone that believes, they may not necessarily believe like me, like the Bible is plenary inspired. They may not believe it's inspired. I do. But not every traditionalist does. But they at least will admit that the Bible is at least historically accurate. Right? And so they go from that sort of angle. Then there's this other group. Guys like Israel Finkelstein, also a real jerk. But he is a teacher. And these guys, what they do is they think two things. They believe two things. First of all, they believe that the Bible should be treated as what's called a mytho-historical text. Which means there's a little bit of history in there, sure, but it's kind of sprinkled about in the midst of all this mythology. So guys like David, that we're going to talk about here in a second, they think it's kind of like Davy Crockett, right? Maybe a real guy, but not really who we say he was. But that his legend was built up over time, right? And then the other thing they say is that Israel was not a united nation before the return of the Babylonian activity, or perhaps even later. They think that the Bible was actually written in Babylon during the Babylonian exile, about 586 BC, give or take. So they're not very nice guys sometimes. No, they're actually pretty nice people, but I don't know why they come to these conclusions. And it turns out, the more time passes, the more we find out that these guys are wrong. But they still cling on. I don't know. I don't get it. So what they say is that David had to be a myth. Because they say there's no historical or archaeological evidence for the Davidic lineage. In other words, there's no evidence that he was a king. And I do have to admit, for the most part, they're kind of right. We don't have any information about David or his kingdom. He's not so much as mentioned anywhere except for a couple places, including this one right here. So it's hard to find evidence for David. So what people say when they can't find evidence, well, the Bible's wrong, right? No. And there's this guy right here. His name is Avram Biran. And Avram, which is like Abram, that's how we pronounce it in English, right? Abram. Avram Biran is an Israeli archaeologist and a student of the famous William Albright. He's probably the most famous biblical archaeologist. He was like the real Indiana Jones, right? Only he didn't loot. He was an actual archaeologist. Avram was working at a site called Tel Dan, which, if you know your biblical geography, is right at the very top of the Israeli nation, right? Of ancient Israel. Right next to Mount Hebron, right? And while he was working there in 1993 to 1994, he found this beauty. What's called the Tel Dan Stela. And a stela is just kind of like a victory stone. It's basically a king that has conquered an area and he's bragging about it, right? He's bragging about all the victories he had and all the stuff he got and everything like that and how he put this nation to shame. Well, this thing was found, and it was believed to be written by a king who lived in Damascus, which is just in Syria, just north of Israel. And his name was Hazael. And Hazael, the Bible tells us, I don't think I do have it in here. Hazael, in the Bible, tells us that he had conquered at one point some of the northern territories in Israel. At one point. And this is confirming that, and he is bragging about it, of course, because that's what kings do. And so he talks about all the articles from the temple that he stole from the temple of Yahweh, and it's in there, by the way. As well as several other things. But here's the really neat thing. On it, right there, this is a replica that I had at the museum that I used to work at in Tennessee. But right here, you can see in the inscription that looks like this. Oh, I didn't do it. That's actually supposed to be in Hebrew. I forgot. I don't have the font on here. But that is in Hebrew. Boy, that kind of is anticlimactic. Didn't mean to spit on you. I'm sorry. So, this is what it would look like in English letters. And Hebrew is written from right to left. So let's flip that around. Boy, it really likes to flip, doesn't it? There we go. And it would look like this in English. B-Y-T-D-V-D. Now, the neat thing about this is that Hebrew doesn't have any vowels in it. You don't write vowels in Hebrew. You only write the consonants. So let's put the vowels in there. And this is what it looks like. Bet David is what it says. Now, David, you know, don't you? What does that sound like? David, right? It actually says Bet David means the house of David. And what he's talking about is he has ended the line of the house of David here. This thing dates back to about the 10th century BC. So this is a couple generations after David was around. Right? So David's already dead by this point. But one of the kings of the divided kingdom is king now. But they're the house of David. So this is the first evidence that we have of there being a David. This is the first time his name is mentioned. And so this was kind of supposed to be the last nail in that coffin of biblical minimalism, right? Because they said there is no David. There's no evidence of David. And so we thought this was going to end that argument. Nope. Now they're saying, well, maybe there was a David, possibly, but he wasn't really king over a united nation. He was just kind of a tribal leader, and it was kind of like Davy Crockett. We just made his story a lot bigger than it really was. Boy, you start with a bad conclusion, you're just going to stick with it, aren't you? So now the question that is really popular, and Crystal can tell you a lot more about this than I can. This is per area. But the thing about this, the big question that's out there right now in biblical archaeology is, was Israel a united nation or not? Did Israel really happen, the history of Israel happen the way that the Bible says? Well, the more evidence we find, and there is more and more piling up, the more we're starting to find out, yes, definitely, Israel David's name himself, or who he was. And we're getting close. Every day we're getting closer and closer. Let's talk about Jericho. I love this place. That was an example of one artifact that was found at a site. Well, let's take a look at a whole site for a second and see what it's like. A site is a place where you find archaeological stuff, basically. A city, for example. Well, Jericho, we all know the story about Jericho, right? In the book of Judges. When Israel was taken out of captivity from Egypt, they wandered in the desert for how long? 70 years, right? 40 years, right? Yeah, that's right. And by the way, there's no archaeological evidence found of the wanderings in the desert. Why is that? Does anybody know? It's a trick question, sort of.
Things didn't wear out.
That's right, nothing wore out. So why would they leave anything? They just kept bringing it with them. So there's nothing there to find in the first place, because they took it all with them. All right, but when they got to Canaan, one of the first places they went to, they destroyed Ai and that sort of thing, or Ai is how it's actually pronounced. Pronounced I, by the way. Then you have Jericho, and they find this place, and the Bible tells us exactly how it happened, right? You all know the story very well. I'm not going to reiterate it for you. But this is an actual picture. This is an aerial shot of the site. It has been excavated 3 times at least. I think more than that now. And they found all kinds of information about this. First of all, let's talk about the wall, right? That's the big question. The wall. This is a picture of the outer wall, or the first wall. See, the way the wall was built was you have this neat little situation where you have a rock wall that was built first. And it's an early made. Then on top of that, turns out you have this wall that was made out of mud bricks, which is something that was really popular as a building material in those days, and still is today in Israel and the surrounding area. And so this right here is a rock wall that's still up. Here's the neat thing. Don't get too disappointed yet. Yeah, the rock wall is still up, but there's a reason for it. This is a picture of what it looks like, according to the evidence, of how the wall was built. There was an outer wall first, and there was the stone lower wall, and then there was the mud brick upper wall, and then there was another wall on the hillside above it. So you had 2 walls out of this city. Really, really strong, fortified, right? Now, how do we know this? Well, this is a picture from one of the archaeologists, who was a lady. Her name was Catherine Kenyon, who excavated this site, one of the first people. Actually, no, she was the second person to excavate the site. But one thing she found was that here is the hillside, right? And this is the stone wall that we saw earlier. Now, what do you think this red stuff is? Turns out those are mud bricks from a wall that was built on top of here. Let's go back to our other picture here. Remember the Bible story tells us, the biblical account, I should say. I hate calling it stories. It sounds like it's made up. And the biblical account, the historical account in the Bible tells us that the Israelites walked around the city, right? And that when it finally was destroyed, there was an earthquake, and then all the walls fell down, right? Here's the thing about it. If there's an earthquake here, and the walls fall, what direction are they going to fall? They're going to fall down this way, right? Outward, because they're on a hillside. This is a tell, this is a mountainside. So they're going to fall down outwardly. And here's the neat thing. Okay, this floor right here is the ground that Joshua and his army would have been standing on, right? That wall is pretty tall. That wall is, 23 feet, including the upper wall. So I would guess probably about 10, 12 feet high is the stone wall. Even if those walls fall, it's going to be hard for them to climb that. How are they going to climb that big rock wall right there and get up without being killed by all the soldiers above? Now here's the neat thing. Look at the way they fell. What happened? When they fell, they created basically a ramp. And all they had to do was run up the ramp, do a little hop over the stone wall, and go into the city and destroy everything. God provided a way for them to easily take the city. city according to our evidence of what it would have looked like. We were talking about teachers and how they like to claim that the Bible is wrong. My archaeology teacher in Memphis, none of my teachers were Christian. None of them believed in the Bible at all. They were all atheists. Every single one of them. I didn't know a single Christian teacher. Actually, that's not true. I didn't know one. Ryan Parrish. But one of my archaeology teachers, his name was Dr. Barton, he told us in class one time, he said, you know why the Bible's wrong? It talks about Jericho and this big wall that surrounds the entire city. And sure enough, archaeologists have found a wall, but only on one section of the city. Really? What he was talking about is they had excavated one section of the city, and that's where they found the wall. Doesn't mean it wasn't there around the whole city. You see, sometimes if you want to believe something to be true, you'll make up just about any kind of thing to acknowledge what you say is true. When this is actually what the archaeologists say the city looked like. And it did surround the entire city. This is probably the most fortified city in this time period of all. Here's something else they found. What did the Bible say that the Israelites did after they destroyed the city? Well, biggest bonfire in history, right? They burned everything. And they did this with all the cities that they conquered, supposedly. Some of the Bible says they were supposed to. They didn't necessarily do that all the time. But they were supposed to destroy all the cities and then burn them to the ground. They didn't always do that, like I said, according to the scriptures. And according to the archaeological record, too, it agrees with that. But Jericho, they did actually burn the whole place. And guess what? We found evidence of it. There is a burn layer all around the city. And then here's the neat thing. We can even tell exactly when it happened. You know how? Number one, the Bible tells us it happened during the springtime, right after harvest, right? You know how we can tell when the city was destroyed? There were these pots here, filled with burnt wheat, or burnt to a crisp. Now, why would a city have all kinds of these pots filled with wheat in a particular section of the city, basically a storage area? Because it was right after harvest, and they were storing up their wheat for the summertime, basically. Right? And for the winter. So we know that it happened right during the springtime, exactly when the Bible says that it happened. Now there's some question as to what the date was, but we won't get into that today because we don't have time for that. Let's talk about one of my favorite artifacts. I told you that Mesopotamia and Babylon is my favorite subject. That's the stuff that I study, Abraham's people. They're called the Sumerians. And there is a particular story that I'm really fond of in the scriptures. We actually just got through studying it in our Bible study at Dover Church. We had just finished studying the flood, which is my favorite story. Because it's a story that is not only in the scriptures, but it is something that is told all around the world. It's a story that keeps popping up all over the place. In fact, historians say, and I agree with them, that this is probably the only example that we have in all of human history of a truly universal story that is told and told and told by virtually every single culture in all of human history. And that's the story of the flood. Now, this is a tablet right here that was found in the city of Nineveh. And it was discovered in 1847 by Sir Austin Henry Layard. Layard is another one of the most famous archaeologists in archaeology in general. Everybody knows Layard. So he found this tablet right here, which is called the Assyrian Flood Tablet, or it's actually called the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Have you ever heard of that before? Gilgamesh? Really cool guy. They really need to make a story or a movie about this story. Right? I mean, anybody that's read it before, I don't know why they haven't made a movie of this, because it's like epic tale. It's like our first story, one of our first stories anyway. I'd argue that the flood story was older, but anyway. This tablet right here was written by the Assyrian Emperor Ashurbanipal at about 669 BC to 631 BC. And what he did was he collected, he wanted to make a library. And this is one of the first libraries, right? So he writes to everybody around the country of Assyria, and even into Egypt and that sort of thing. He says, bring me your tablets. Send me in all of the things that you have, all the knowledge that you have stored out in your store, in your city, and I'm going to make a collection of it. And I'm going to call this thing, what we call it today anyway, a library. And anyone can come in here and look at any kind of story, any kind of magic book, any kind of thing writing that they want to find, they can find it in this library. So we found this library of Ashurbanipals, and there are literally hundreds of texts. Now here's the cool thing. It was destroyed, when Nineveh was destroyed, the library was burned to the ground. Now you think that's terrible for a library, right? That's like the worst thing that could ever happen. Except for with these things. This is a clay tablet, which is made out of clay. And the neat thing about clay, when you have a document that's written in clay, the neat thing is what happens when it's exposed to fire? Is it destroyed?
It's hard.
It gets really hard. This thing is basically a giant rock now. So what fire does is when you burn down a library filled with clay tablets, it actually helps you preserve the library rather than destroying it. That's the cool thing. So now we have these things, and not only do we have them and they're decaying and bugs are eating them like they do in libraries today, no. These things are preserved forever. I mean, forever. If you ever want to be written something down, or have something preserved forever, write it down in clay. I guarantee you it'll stay there for the end of time until God brings judgment. So, this entire library included what is today called the standard version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'll tell you this story real quick. It was translated by George Smith of the British Museum in 1872, and the original is still there. Here's the story. There is this king named Gilgamesh, and he's a real jerk. He's not a very good king at all. And the people are complaining about him so much that the gods, remember these are people that do not believe in one God. This is polytheistic. They believe in many gods. So they start shouting out to the gods, send us a companion to our king. Somebody to tame this guy, because he's a real jerk. So the gods make this guy, his name is Enkidu, and he turns him into a wild man, a guy in the forest. Hillbilly like myself, right? I'm from Eastern Kentucky, so this is a personal story for me, right? And they make this guy Enkidu, and they send him into the forest. Eventually he becomes civilized. We won't go into how. He becomes civilized, and he decides he's going to challenge Gilgamesh to a fight. Right? So he goes to the city of Uruk, which is the city where Gilgamesh is king, and he challenges him. And they fight, and they end up, basically it ends up being a draw, depending on what story you're talking about. This one, it ends up being a draw. And so they end up respecting each other, and they become the best of friends. And the story of Gilgamesh is all about all the adventures they go on. Well, eventually, Enkidu dies. Gilgamesh is struck with this grief, and he's so sad. And he wants to know, first of all, he knows he can't bring Enkidu back. But he wants to know why people have to die and how someone can cheat death. How someone can become immortal. Hey, here's a story about a guy. His name is Utnapishtim, sorry. And Utnapishtim is a guy who is now immortal. He's basically a god of the underworld. And he hears about this story, and he used to be human. He knew that. And so he was going to go to the underworld and visit this Utnapishtim to find out the answer to his question. So he goes there. And the story tells all about his journey there. It's actually pretty epic, pretty neat. And while he's there, he finds Utnapishtim, and Utnapishtim tells him a story. He says, once upon a time, the people around the earth got so overpopulated, they got so noisy that the gods couldn't get any sleep, so they got angry. And they decided they're going to destroy the entire world with, anybody know? With water, right? With a flood. So they make this decision, and one of the gods, his name is Enki, who's the god of the fresh water, he decides that, no, I don't want all of humanity to die, so he finds a guy named Utnapishtim, and he warns him about it. And he tells him about this flood that's coming. He tells him to build a boat, right? Only this boat is not like the one that's in the Bible. It's actually a cube, basically. It's equal in height and length and width and all that stuff. Not very floatable. This isn't a very good boat. At least not in this story anyway. There's other versions where it's actually a very good story. Very good boat. So Utnapishtim builds this boat, and he sends him his family to get on board, and then he sends animals. And the animals go on this thing 2 by 2. It mentions that. At least in some versions it does. And the floods come. Floods for 7 days and 7 nights. And then the waters recede, and guess what? Utnapishtim opens up the window when he finds out the storm has stopped. He sends out a dove and then 2 ravens. The dove flies around and it comes back. The second raven doesn't come back, and then the third one comes back with an olive branch in its beak. And he knows that there's land out there. The boat lands, he makes a sacrifice to the gods, and the gods make him immortal. And that's pretty much the end of the story. Now, the story of Gilgamesh goes on and talks about his journey to gain immortality. He never does it. He fails at it, but that's not really pertinent to us. This story that this talks about, though, this 11th tablet, sounds really familiar to us, doesn't it? It should. And it's something that is repeated all throughout history by, again, every culture that is out there. So the things that we talked about today, these are just a few items that kind of give an idea of why biblical archaeology is important to us. It reveals to us a hidden history that some historians just don't want you to know about, unfortunately. And they don't want to acknowledge anyway. Biblical archaeology doesn't begin to prove the Bible, but it certainly ends up proving it in the end. Because it shows that, yes, these events did happen. These are things that were real. These are people that were real. These are places that were real. This isn't a fairy tale that happened in a far, far away land. I guess it's far away for us, but not that far away. As with all academic pursuits, biblical archaeology and Bible study are both all about searching, digging for truth. And that's what our Bible study is about, isn't it? It's about searching the Word of God to find the truth revealed in His Word. And so is science. These two aren't in fight with one another. If we listen, if we open up our hearts and accept the evidence as it comes out, without bias, without worrying about whether I'm right or wrong, then we'll find that they both coincide together. And we can learn a lot, not just about ancient history and cultures and things like that, but we can learn about the truths that are revealed within the Word of God. This is Psalm 119, verse 160. The sum of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous rules endure forever. My question to you is, will you believe what the Word of God says? Because it certainly is coincided with truth. It is truth. Thank you very much.